Looking for a little motivation? Many listeners ask me, how do you stay motivated to exercise? Meaning not me personally, but them. If you are asking the same, today's podcast offers an unlikely motivation source. It's certainly not my usual answer. I'd offer something like, choose an activity that you love. Start with just 5 or 10 minutes and pair the exercise with something or someone that you love. But today, we dig a little deeper and look at why you might be lacking motivation in the first place. And we have a potential solve for that. So in fact, if it is dopamine, then listen to the episode. In addition to motivation, this episode is all about answering questions from our previous episode with my guest about C60 Purple Power. So if you haven't yet heard that first episode, you're going to want to go back to listen to it, but you don't have to go now. Today, you won't be lost, but you probably will be very curious. So the link to that podcast will be in the show notes. And just in case you are here and listening to our C60 info for the first time, let me introduce my guest, Ken Swartz. He is AKA Ken the Scientist. He's the founder and chief science officer of C60 Purple Power, a health and wellness company committed to delivering the highest quality C60 products available. Ken, by the way, again, he's back for the second interview because we promised that after my 4-week trial and after we released the first interview, we would have him come back to answer questions from our listeners as well as share my experience. Ken earned a Master of Science degree from the University of Colorado at Denver and a Bachelor of Science in Economics from Arizona State University. He spent the early part of his career as a secondary school teacher and is passionate about helping and educating people. Ken has run several research science laboratories over the course of his career, and he discovered C60 while developing the MOXIE fusion reactor. During his research, he became aware of the powerful free radical neutralizing properties of C60. Now, just to take you for a science lesson here, I'm going to divert and come back. So think about free radicals. They're what do damage in our body. So certain exposures to certain toxins or oxidation, even from exercise, can have a negative effect and release free radicals. Neutralizing that is really important to stop damage. So Ken first began using C60 himself as a radiation protectant while he was leading a fusion reactor project. He noticed after taking C60 himself for a couple months, not only was it protecting him from the radiation, but it was also improving his health overall. So he continued taking it. About 8 months after Ken started taking C60, he was at a routine visit with his optometrist, discovered that his dry macular degeneration was gone. The doctor was dumbfounded, told him that in all his years he'd never seen or heard such a miraculous outcome. Due to his healing experience, Ken decided to dedicate himself to the research, study, production of C60 Buckminster Fullerene products. That's a mouthful. In 2016, he founded C60 Purple Power, which offers C60 made with certified organic oils. That's important. And 99.99% pure subliminated carbon 60. Also important, Ken talks about that today. Never exposed to solvents, important, and sourced in the U.S. Don't we love that? Ken believes that your health is your responsibility, and he is on a mission to help people feel empowered to take back control of their health. Ken mentions in the show that one of the first noticeable changes for those who try C60 is motivation. It stems from the boost in dopamine. So though libido and energy are big draws for many of our audience members, C60 could also be a motivation source if you're seeking a little boost and just not finding it. Let's dive in to this episode. I can't wait for you to hear about the result that I'm getting, and I'm at 4 weeks right now. Ken, thanks so much for coming back.
Glad to be back.
I have so much to talk to you about. Actually, I'm thinking I have to tell him this, I have to tell him that, I have to tell him this. So we are going to share my experience with the audience and embellish that. But I also want to ask you just a few questions, kind of preliminary things based on our first interview. And listeners, we're going to link to that as well. But also we got several, like right away, immediate. We've got a lot of curious listeners who heard the first one. They've got questions about whether this is appropriate for them because they saw so many others. I'm already in, ordered some, can't wait to try it. You had me at libido. These were some of the comments. So I want to ask you to refresh everybody's memory or say it for the first time if you didn't hear the first one. What are the first benefits that people usually see when starting C60?
Well, the first thing you'll notice is an increase in energy. And then a little bit after that, you're going to see an increase in, let's say, libido. So those are the two things that you notice. And the reason it is because carbon-60, it's a little molecule. Imagine a little molecule, 60 carbon atoms shaped like a little hollow soccer ball. It's characterized as a superoxide dismutase mimic. And what that means is there's the most damaging oxidative radical in your body, which is primarily produced by the mitochondria, which are the powerhouses of the cell, is superoxide. And that's basically an oxygen with an extra electron. And usually the cells produce SOD to take care of that. Well, C60 mimics SOD. And of course, as we get older, our production of SOD goes down. So when you take C60, the superoxide is taken care of, so it doesn't damage the mitochondria of the cell. And that means that the Krebs cycle, that makes ATP, the energy molecule for your cell, can operate at full efficiency like it was when you were much younger. So that's going to be your increase in energy. Now, the other thing that mitochondria make is pregnenolone, which is the precursor molecule for all the hormones. So once you take C60, you're going to get a big increase in pregnenolone, which then your body uses to take to turn into whatever hormone it wants. And in this case, it turns it into the androgens, testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, and you get a big increase in libido.
Yes, I noticed that right away. And here's, I was a little skeptical, so I have to give you that right away. But my energy is already pretty good. And so I was like, well, am I going to notice that? Am I going to notice anything? And so I can't say directly that I noticed a big uptick in energy, although I think I would say maybe my energy extended over the course of the day a little bit. So maybe a little bit the light went up and also it extended. But the biggest one was a noticeable change in libido. And then this I really just noticed about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, I began to notice it. But like many women listening in midlife, there suddenly seems to be more hair in the drain in the shower. And it's, that can be a sign of thyroid and a lot of things. First of all, I'm not seeing that, but my hair is thicker, fuller to hold on to. And I'm like, I didn't even know I needed that back. I didn't know I lost that. Maybe I didn't lose it. But that's been a fantastic asset, one I hadn't counted on. So those are probably the biggest three for me. So tell me, share that. Hair, do you notice or hear that frequently?
Oh, yeah, that was one of the original studies with C60, is that used topically and evidently from people's experiences internally increases the growth rate of hair. So it kind of makes the follicle cycle last longer. So people's hair will grow longer. And for people that let's say especially for various hormone reasons, people are losing their hair, the return of those hormones, of course, brings the hair back, and it tends to re-stimulate hair follicles in those people. Unfortunately, for me and others, it doesn't re-stimulate people with male pattern baldness. So that's not going to cure that problem. But and also another thing people will notice when you take C60 is your nails will grow faster.
Ah, yes. Nice. I guess that was a little hard for me to tell too, just given that it's summertime and it seems that already happens for me. But I do want to ask you this too. So I know you and I at the very end of the last show talked about topical, and I haven't done the topical. So just so everybody listening is clear, I've just ingested it. So I've used the drops, and just to be clear, so the cinnamon flavored drops, I've loved that in coffee, but I gave coffee up. So I found other ways to ingest and didn't do it topically at all and still have noticed benefits. But the other thing we talked about is fine lines and wrinkles. And I have not, because I've forgotten, just because it's not in the bathroom where it probably needs to be. So I remember it at night. That's my next experiment. So I've got a class reunion. So we're going to see how long that one takes.
Yeah, that was actually the first study they ever did was with Japanese women. They had a face cream, and C60 significantly reduced wrinkles and fine lines in Japanese women.
And the question is, so you have a timeline here because this is the 4th of July weekend when I have this, but how long does it take to see full results or even just a start? So for me, everybody listening, it's been about 4 weeks right now.
So it's going to take a little bit longer on that. One of the things that C60 does is increase stem cell production. Mm-hmm. It causes apoptosis, that's programmed cell death, and senescent cells. Those are like zombie cells that have gone into the fermentation process. They're not doing anything with the body. They have shortened telomeres or damaged chromosomes. And so C60, when it restarts the mitochondria in those cells, cause apoptosis, which is programmed cell death, but it's non-inflammatory. They get cleaned up by the phagocytes, and then the body sends out signals, hey, we need more stem cells to replace these zombie cells that are now gone. And so you get a huge increase in stem cells. And when you do that, that means a lot of those stem cells will go into making new skin cells or new immune cells. And so that's one of the things C60, probably one of the reasons why C60 reduces fine lines and wrinkles, because you have cells that are now producing collagen better than they were for quite a while. And that helps.
Fantastic. Okay. I'm excited to try that. All right. And I want to ask you this. So if I stop taking C60, I being collectively talking for anybody, then do the results that I'm enjoying, do they revert back? Do they go slowly or quickly, or do I just then resume kind of my general aging habits that I had before? What happens?
Well, actually, there's a lot of results that continue. Like in the Botry study, which is the famous study in which C60 increased the lifespan of rats 90%. Worcester rats, they're kind of wimpy rats, by the way. And when the final control rat died, no C60 rats or olive oil rats had died by that time. They stopped giving C60 to the rats, and even though they continued to live longer than the ones that were used to get olive oil, and in fact, a couple of the rats had unfortunate accidents at the end of the study, so they could actually publish. So yeah, there's long-term benefits even if you stop using C60. But these rats use C60 for equivalent of maybe 10 years or something. So in rat years, that is. So it's if you lose C60 for a long time, it's going to have long-lasting benefits afterwards.
Fantastic. Okay. And I'm going to circle back. It might seem like I'm backtracking, but I want to make sure I've asked this clearly for all the listeners who are already, waiting for theirs to come in the mail or getting started. What would you wish for someone so that they could experience the full benefits or get a really good idea of here are the benefits I'm going to experience and they'll actually feel them? How long would you suggest they plan on committing to the trial to see if it works for them?
I would say at least a month. You'll see some immediate results in the first week or two, but to really see some other benefits, you want to stay a month, because another benefit, people notice an increase in motivation. And that's essentially due to a rise in dopamine, because C60 is a really powerful antioxidant, so it will suppress inflammation in the body, which a consequence of that is dopamine levels rise. especially that chronic inflammation. So that takes a little bit longer, but yeah. So people will start doing exercise routines that they've given up, or start doing hobbies that they had given up, because that motivation, which is caused by dopamine, comes back.
Love that. Okay. Take your C60 and call me in the morning, everybody. Okay. All right, Ken. So let's talk a little bit about dose. And I know that was a question that was in some of the comments. They were like, Debra, I'd like to know what's the amount you're taking. And I'll come back to that. But first, can you say, does your C60 dosage, does that determine how fast you see results? And next, could you speak to, okay, there's you, there's me. We're, obviously male and female, but we're of two different weights. So is the dose appropriate based on weight, or how do you determine where to go?
Well, at C60purplepower.com, or it's now Shop C60, there's actually a dose calculator. But basically, for most people that are mid-age and mid-weight, it's at least a tablespoon a day. Now, if you're heavier or you're older, then you need to up that up, which is, I believe, a tablespoon is 2 teaspoons, which is around what I take a day. So somewhere between a teaspoon and a couple of teaspoons is all you need, depending on. So if you're like midweight and mid-age, a teaspoon is fine. But if you got older, you're probably wanting to do a tablespoon a day.
Sweet. And just to answer that question for everybody, so I started conservatively, and I think that's a part of the instructions. So I started just to see how my gut would handle it and any other symptoms. So I started with the cinnamon coconut in coffee, and it was about a teaspoon to begin. And then, a couple of days of that, I increased fairly rapidly. So I was probably having about a tablespoon by the end of the week. And then I actually began to add some of the olive oil onto like a salad or a meal later in the day as well. So as you had reported on your own status, I felt like I was tolerating it really well. And so I increased. So that was for Cindy, just to answer the question. Okay, I've got a couple questions coming directly from our listeners. So if you've been waiting, guys, here they come. So number one is, this is a broad question. I was wondering if I could get rid of half of my supplements if I start taking this. Would you do a show on supplements and how much you should really be taking? That's a big ask.
Yeah. C60 makes everything work better. So you'll be able to process the supplements or the nutrients you're taking at the present. But the fact is that our food is so depleted in nutrients, micro minerals, and everything else that probably you still want to take a lot of your supplements. I mean, there's key things that we just need in the American diet, like magnesium, iodine, vitamin D. People just don't get enough of these, along with vitamin K, of course. People just don't get enough of these in their diet. So, and I always recommend, even though I'm not a medical doctor, cannot give medical advice, right? A broad, multi-supplement is always a good thing to take.
Agree. And for the listener who was asking this question, and for anybody else, here's where neither one of us, and a doctor also wouldn't do this and say how much you should really be taking. The best thing to do is to test, not guess. So do a micronutrient test, find out what your levels are, review that either with a functional health coach or a functional doctor that you're working with to look at not whether you fall in norms, but whether you're in optimal levels. And then what you might want to consider taking to take where you are now to optimal levels. And that would be the way that I would start. So no one out there is just following all women at certain ages should take X. Okay, Ken, for you, the question is, I knew this was coming up. How will this affect you if you are on HRT?
HRT is?
Hormone replacement therapy. I'm so sorry.
Oh, well, that's sorry. I'm not all the things. Yeah, no, actually it will, well, obviously your C60 will cause your hormone levels to rise. And I can give an example with a guy we had. He was 7 years old. He went to his doctor. He had testosterone levels of 350, which is pretty low. So his doctor put him on creams. He was up to about in the low 700s. And then he started taking C60, and the next time he went to his doctor, his testosterone levels were 1,200. So his doctor backed him off of the hormones. And, that didn't happen overnight. So, but one thing we do have a counterindication: if you are taking blood thinners, you need to consult with your doctor before you start taking C60, because C60 can fix the underlying problem by restarting mineralocorticoid production and thyroid production in your, and which is kind of regulates blood thickness. And so your blood could get too thin. So you'd need more testing. So always consult with your doctor if you're on blood thinners and you want to take C60.
Well, okay, sir, you have ESP, because that was the next question. So glad we got that one in. I appreciate that. All right. So for those of you who had the question, you're on blood thinner, and there are some other questions from those of you who are not just taking HRT, but this one is, and I may mispronounce this, but this is a drug after being treated for breast cancer. So this could be a number of things, but in this case, it's anastrozole, I'm going to say, okay? And is there any drug interaction with that? And again, what would you suggest? And she goes on to ask about cholesterol lowering medication or meds for blood pressure.
Okay, that's the first thing. C60 doesn't interact with any drugs, minerals, nutrients, supplements, pharmaceuticals, nothing. C60 only interacts with two oxidative radical species. One is superoxide, the most damaging oxidative radical in the body, and the other is the hydroxyl ion, or radical, which is the second most damaging oxidative radical in the body. It doesn't react with anything else, which is really important because it doesn't react with the signaling molecules. There's a lot of reactive oxidative species in your body that your body uses as signaling molecules, like the nitrogen oxides. That's your vasodilator, makes your capillaries expand or contract. Hydrogen peroxide, and a bunch based around sulfur, iron, and zinc. So it doesn't interact with any of those signaling molecules. So C60 has no toxicity at any level. A lot of antioxidants like NAC or vitamin E or something, if you take too much, you can have negative effects because it interacts with those signaling molecules. C60 doesn't do that. So you don't have to ever worry about the interactions between C60 and any pharmaceuticals or nutrients. Now, the thing is, C60 fixes a lot of underlying problems by restarting mitochondria function. So like I mentioned with the hormone levels, but as a general rule, it has no interactions at all with pharmaceuticals.
Great. And so for those of you who are listening who are also, maybe you're on thyroid, all right, then that too, right, you're going to fix potentially some underlying causes. You may want to more closely monitor and talk with your physician about the fact that you're doing this and would like to monitor more closely your thyroid together with them so that you're taking the right dose based on what's happening for you. So I think we've covered probably a majority of the questions related to someone taking something else and what would be their concern. So I appreciate that. This question comes from Renee. Now, okay, so I'm going to interpret the comment here, and I appreciate you sending this, Renee. Renee struggled a little bit with some details, but her message goes, in a Google search, P60, which I believe she meant C60, exposed to light is carcinogenic. So processing and manufacturing wasn't discussed by Jen, and I'm pretty sure she meant you, Ken. I did share this, and that's about as far as I could go, is that all of the products are in dark glass bottles. The packages is wrapped around that protects often any oils that are vulnerable. But do you want to address this Google researcher, and what do we know about the carcinogenic effects or the research there?
Oh, no, yeah, C60 can have photooxidative effects. But in that research study, which was a hit piece by a big pharma corporation who financed it, they left the C60 in a clear glass bottle, or actually a clear plastic bottle, in the equivalent of 3 weeks of full sunlight. Okay, so that's the level that caused that. Now, our products are manufactured in the dark, kept in the dark, packaged, everything else. So it's not a problem, but this was a hit piece. Oh, and that same pharma, that same hit piece, they also said that C60 didn't increase the lifespan of these rats. Well, if you actually study the piece, you'll find out they only gave C60 to the rats once every 2 weeks, right? In the actual study that showed that C60 significantly increased the lifespan of rats, the rats received C60 every day. And not only that, but they picked this special type of hybrid rats or mice whose chromosomes break down, because one type of mouse is bred with another type of mouse and just causes the chromosomes to disintegrate. So they got like early middle-aged mice whose chromosomes were already disintegrating. And of course, C60 once every 2 weeks would make nothing of that. And also in the toxicity studies, they used a special type of mouse, young mouse, which is extremely sensitive to oxidative radical breakdowns. In fact, it's a type of mice you have to actually keep with red lights, because even room lights will cause sunburns on these mice. So, yeah, I mean, it was a total pharmaceutical hit piece on that. But yeah, you should keep C60 in the dark. But for it to become dangerous oxidative levels. And actually what happened is the C60 interacted with the oils, dropped to the bottom of the container in compounds, and then all that was left in the bottle was rancid oil. So the people actually never received any C60. They just received rancid oil, which is not good for you. The little mice did. And so they didn't include that little message in actually that is included in the study if you read, very carefully.
So for listeners who are not understanding the lingo, like a hip piece, describe what you mean. And I many of you do, I realize, but I just want to make sure we're all inclusive. And so you understand what's happening here with alternative resources that are not medication, that have negative side effects, and what happens when pharmaceuticals are threatened.
Well, yeah, it's basically they will finance studies, farcical studies, to show whatever the product is not good for you, and then they'll to try to shut down, because C60 is only one tool in the toolbox for good health, but it's important, and people have been having a lot of significant health benefits. Let's say in hormone, the hormone replacement, they don't need it, and also, there's a lot of other studies, just gobs and gobs of other studies of what C60 has done on humans and test animals. And so it's a threat to pharma profits. And because when anything becomes a threat to pharma profits, they will respond with various fake studies to discount the value of it. I mean, we've seen this with the CBDs. We've seen this with a wide variety of different, supplements that people use. It's just, they're trying constantly. I think some congressman from Illinois is trying to put one of those bills in that would basically ban supplements, and unless, of course, they came from big pharmaceutical companies. So, yeah, they're constantly trying to shut down the supplement business. And C60 is just caught up in that general attack on your health freedom to choose how you want. And another thing is C60 was found to be pretty effective fighting a certain something that had been going on around infecting people. And so that's another reason why C60 got on the radar.
Tell me how it helped that silly little virus we might have been thinking about.
Well, one of the things is that C60 often gets rid of inflammation, so that's that's your body's maximum, but it also increases after a while. You get that buildup of extra stem cells, high stem cell levels. And when your immune system is challenged by an invader, it recruits stem cells to become various types of white blood cells, to leukocytes, to fight, the infection, whatever it may be. And so if you have like a big army of stem cells just sitting there, they can convert immediately into immune cells, and then the body can go do that. Also, they found that C60, when on histamine cells, mast cells, they produce the histamine, that C60 prevented the occurrence of what would be called the cytokine storm. It moderated the release of histamines. And also people that have allergies, they'll notice you take C60, your allergies go way down. They don't go away, but they become significantly and noticeably less.
Fantastic. And I think we all know, it's not gone. So, I mean, just last week, I think there were 2 people from a group I belong to who had come down with it, had to cancel a trip. So it's not totally over. So might want to keep that one handy, everybody. Okay, Ken, I can speak about my own experience, and I have, and we have answered many, I think, questions and concerns about our audience members who are interested in taking it and what the benefits might be and how they might want to get started. So, to all of you listeners, I also want to make sure I'm sharing in the show notes, my favorite ways to use it. Mention a couple of those: the cinnamon flavored coconut oil in coffee, if you're doing that. Coconut oil just added to a smoothie is the other way that I found is just easy to get it. But I also have used the olive oil just drizzled on salads or vegetables for lunch or dinner. Ken, what are your favorite ways to use it? How do you insert it into your day?
Well, usually I actually, one of the things I also promote on some of my shows is intermittent fasting. It's the
Mm-hmm.
only method of quote dieting that I found that ever worked for me. So when I break my intermittent fast, I'll take the C60 at that time. But yeah, some things we have used it in. I have used it in the olive oil version in salads, but you can also add it to like soups or smoothies. A lot of times I'll grind one of those up in my blender and add some of the C60 to that. And so there's a whole bunch of different ways. In fact, on the website, you can link to a bunch of C60 recipes. But yeah, so there's wide varieties of things. I don't use it in anything that carbonizes anything like baking or maybe frying. Probably not a good idea. But things like
Mm-hmm.
boiling and salads and stuff, it's perfectly fine.
Fantastic. Okay, I'm going to clarify something. So, say a little bit more about when you introduce it. So, when you're intermittent fasting, are you taking the C60 during your fasting window?
No, right as it ends. Because
Okay.
C60
Okay.
C60 is dissolved. It doesn't have any solubility in water, so
Mm-hmm.
it has to be dissolved in an oil. And of course, an
Mm-hmm.
oil is a nutrient, though technically it's kind of keeping you in the keto, especially if you're taking the coconut oil. It technically
Yep.
doesn't break your fast, but usually I take C60 when I take my first meal breaking the fast.
Fantastic. Okay, great. So I know there are a lot of women out there who are also dabbling with intermittent fasting. So just so you all know, I prefer that you exercise in a fed state, not fasted, but I'm also a fan of intermittent fasting if it's appropriate for you if you're listening. So that was a great share. And I'm going to ask you, Ken. So, first of all, I'd love for you to come back sometime in the future. So I want to kind of keep going with my experiment and then bring you back. And I'd love a couple of our community members to step forward. So if you're listening, I'm talking to you. Yeah, don't look behind you. It's you. So I want you to share what kind of results you get as well. And we may just bring you up on the show. Ken, are you willing to come back?
Absolutely.
Okay. I mean, that was the only answer, really. So we were going to edit a no. But is there a question that, based on the things, the results, and the concerns that anybody might have, is there a question that I should have asked that we didn't get covered today?
No, I could probably just a few things I could talk about is if you're looking for a C60 product, obviously I'd like you to have ours, but there's basically three things you want to look for, and that's purity. You want to look for 99.99% purity because that's the purest on the market. And then it goes into the second reason is we use sublimated C60. And if you remember from high school chemistry class, sublimation is a cousin of evaporation. And so we basically, but a lot of companies, they use C60 that's derived from solvent-based process. And they basically use methylbenzene, kind of a nasty, somewhat carcinogenic substance to purify their C60. So if you're seeing anything like 99.9% C60, it's almost guaranteed to be solvent-based. And you want to look for sublimated C60. And then the final thing is the carrier oils, which is we kind of pick the Goldilocks section of carrier oils because there are some oils that are like really long lasting, but they're very inflammatory because they have high levels of omega-6s. And that's things like canola oil, soybean oil, sunflower oil, safflower oil. You kind of want to avoid having C60 in those oils because they're inflammatory, and that's kind of what you're trying to prevent with C60. And then there are other oils that are really great for you, like fish oil, flaxseed oil, hemp seed oil, but they go rancid really quickly. In fact, you should never buy those oils off the shelf in your health food store. Always buy that in the refrigerated section. So what we did at C60 Purple Power, we just picked like the Goldilocks of oils. Obviously, olive oil, all organic olive oil. People have been using olive oil for thousands of years. It's in the Mediterranean diet. I'm a little sensitive digesting, so I started putting it in C60 in avocado oil, which is way easier to digest, at least for me. And then finally, we also put it into MCT coconut oil, because MCT means medium chain triglycerides, and your liver can turn those almost immediately into ketones, which your cells can use as a flex fuel. So if you have any like glucose processing issues, or you're a high performance athlete, MCT oil might be the way to go for you.
Sweet. Great advice. Love it. Okay, Ken, it's been a real pleasure to have you here. It's been a great pleasure to experience C60 Purple Power. And again, everybody, the link to try it for yourself will be in the show notes, as well as the timestamps we put. So if you want to listen to this one again, but you actually want to get really specific on one of the questions we asked, because that's similar to you, we have the timestamps on those questions. So we make it really easy to get where you want to go. And that show notes will be at flipping50.com/motivation source. What are you waiting for? Let's start flipping 50 today.